The Berkshire County Registry of Deeds contains property transfers dating back to 1761. Most entries follow a consistent format: grantor, grantee, consideration, metes and bounds, witness signatures, recording date. The ledgers are organized chronologically within each town. Entries are indexed alphabetically by surname and cross-referenced by parcel number. This system remained stable for over a century. In March 1840, a series of land transactions were recorded for a location identified only as Township 7, Provisional District. No such district appears in the 1838 county reorganization records. The transactions total 43 separate parcels, each between 2 and 6 acres. Consideration amounts are listed as private rather than monetary values. This deviates from standard practice. The witness signatures on these deeds match the names of county officials serving at that time, but their handwriting appears rushed compared to other documents from the same period. A note in the margin of the first deed reads, "Recording per Executive Order, March 12, 1840. No corresponding executive order appears in the governor's archived communications for that month. The March 1840 session notes from the Massachusetts General Court make no reference to land disposition in Berkshire County. The county surveyor's maps from 1839 and 1841 show identical boundaries with no new townships designated. Before we move into this year, drop a comment with where you're watching from and the time it is for you. Records like these often reveal themselves differently depending on the hour and the place in which they are observed. The deeds reference Township 7 in relation to existing features, northerly of the Cold River Millworks and westerly of the Turnpike extension. Both landmarks existed. The millworks operated until 1847. The Turnpike served regular traffic. Yet no settlement, no provisional district, and no Township 7 appears in any contemporary atlas or tax assessment record. The land transactions themselves are procedurally valid. The location they describe cannot be placed. Census records provide population counts, household composition, and occupational data. The 1840 federal census for Massachusetts lists every enumerated location by town and district. Enumerators worked methodically, documenting each dwelling in sequence. Their reports include dwelling numbers, family names, age ranges, and racial classifications. Supervisors reviewed returns for completeness before submission to Washington. Berkshire County's 1840 census shows expected population growth in established towns. Mill villages expanded. Agricultural districts remained stable. The enumeration districts follow township boundaries precisely. District boundaries were drawn to ensure no household went uncounted and no area was surveyed twice. Each district's map was filed with the Marshal's office. Enumeration District 14 covers the northwestern section of the county, including portions of 3 established towns. The enumerator's final report lists 147 households over 18 days of fieldwork. His expense vouchers account for lodging, horse rental, and per diem compensation at standard rates. The vouchers match the recorded dates of travel. The report was accepted without question and filed in August 1840. A supplementary notation appears on the back of the district map. Additional survey conducted per instruction, area outside standard route, 22 households recorded separately. No corresponding household records appear in the main enumeration. The notation includes no geographic coordinates, no township name, and no explanation for the separate recording. The supplementary count does not appear in the published census totals. The enumerator's expense vouchers show 3 days of unexplained travel between his documented stops. His final accounting was approved. The 22 households were never integrated into the official record. Their location was never specified. The Massachusetts Board of Education began systematic school district reporting in 1838. Each town submitted annual returns listing school buildings, enrollment figures, teacher qualifications, and operational expenses. The reports followed standardized forms. Local school committees certified the accuracy of returns before submission to the state superintendent. These records document the expansion of common school education across the Commonwealth. The 1840 returns from Berkshire County showed typical patterns. Mill towns reported larger enrollments and newer buildings. Rural districts operated seasonal schedules around agricultural needs. Teacher salaries varied by location and experience. Most districts employed 1 or 2 instructors. The reports note building conditions, textbook availability, and attendance rates. Several districts requested state aid for construction or repairs. One return, filed separately from the standard county compilation, describes a district school provisional location with enrollment of 38 pupils, 1 female teacher, and operational expenses totaling $62 for the year. The teacher's name is listed as E. Morton, certified August 1839. No certification record for an E. Morton appears in the board's registry for that year. The return indicates the school operated from November through March, standard for rural areas. It lists McGuffey readers and slateboards as available materials. The return was filed with a covering letter on official stationery from the Berkshire County School Committee. The letter references the school in question without naming a town or district. It requests the return be processed without standard verification procedures, owing to the temporary nature of settlement. The board's clerk noted receipt in April 1840. No follow-up correspondence exists. The 1841 returns contain no reference to this school. Medical practitioners in Massachusetts were required to report cases of epidemic disease to local boards of health beginning in 1837. Smallpox, scarlet fever, and typhoid required immediate notification. Cholera outbreaks demanded coordinated response. The reporting system aimed to prevent regional spread through quarantine and sanitation measures. Town health officers compiled monthly summaries and forwarded them to the state board. Berkshire County's 1840 health reports show routine patterns. Winter brought respiratory illnesses. Spring saw scattered cases of scarlet fever. No major epidemics occurred. Towns reported births, deaths, and causes of mortality according to established protocols. The reports note improvements in water supply and waste disposal in mill villages. Several towns established pest houses for isolation of contagious cases. In late February 1840, the state board received a request for medical supplies. 10 pounds of calomel, 20 pounds of Peruvian bark, surgical bandages, and bottles of laudanum. The requisition specified delivery to Dr. H. Caldwell, Provisional District, Western County. It was signed by a county health officer, whose name appears on other legitimate documents from that period. The supplies were authorized and dispatched by state courier. The delivery receipt, dated March 8, 1840, confirms transfer of materials to Dr. Caldwell at an unspecified location. The courier's expense report shows a 3-day journey into the Western Hill Country, longer than trips to any established town in that region. The requisition form includes a notation: population approximately 140, situation requires discreet handling. No epidemic was reported. No follow-up requisitions were submitted. No Dr. H. Caldwell appears in the Massachusetts Medical Society registry before or after 1840. The supplies were signed for, delivered, and never accounted for in any subsequent health report. Postal route maps from the 1830s and 1840s document the expansion of mail service across rural Massachusetts. Post offices were established in villages, crossroads settlements, and mill towns. Postmasters submitted quarterly reports on revenue, letter volume, and operational expenses. The Postmaster General maintained detailed records of route changes, new offices, and discontinued locations. These records allow precise reconstruction of communication networks. The 1840 postal route map for Berkshire County shows 23 active post offices connected by regular carrier routes. Routes followed established roads and turnpikes. Delivery schedules accommodated weather and road conditions. Each post office served a defined catchment area. The map includes distance markers and estimated travel times between offices. In March 1840, the Boston postmaster received a request to forward accumulated mail to Postmaster Township 7, Berkshire County, hold for collection. The request was written on standard postal stationery and signed by someone claiming official authority. 17 letters and 3 parcels had accumulated at the Boston office over the preceding 6 weeks, all addressed to various individuals at Township 7, with no further designation. The letters bore correct postage and proper routing marks. The mail was released for forwarding. No record exists of delivery or collection. Township 7 does not appear on the 1840 postal route map or any subsequent revision. The Boston Postmaster's quarterly report makes no mention of the irregular destination. The letters originated from locations throughout New England: Providence, New Haven, Portland, Springfield. They were addressed to common surnames: Briggs, Foster, Thompson, Ward. The senders cannot be traced. The recipients were never identified. The mail simply vanished into the routing system with official authorization. The Massachusetts State Treasurer maintained accounts for all disbursements from the public treasury. Expenditures required legislative appropriation and executive approval. Each payment was recorded with date, amount, recipient, and purpose. Quarterly audits verified accuracy. The system was designed to prevent unauthorized spending and ensure public accountability. The first quarter report for 1840 includes a series of payments listed under Provisional Expenses, Western District. The entries total $2,840, dispersed in 7 separate payments between January and March. Recipients are identified by initials rather than full names. J.H. received $400 for construction materials. S.P. received $620 for provisions and supplies. R.M. received $380 for medical services. The other payments follow similar patterns. These entries differ from standard practice. Legislative appropriations specified exact purposes and named recipients. Emergency expenditures required detailed justification and subsequent legislative review. The provisional expenses appear in the Treasury ledger without corresponding appropriation authority. The state auditor's quarterly review noted the entries but raised no objection. A marginal notation in the auditor's hand reads, "Per Executive Communication, March 1840, Confidential Authorization." No executive communication from March 1840 discusses confidential authorizations or provisional expenses. The governor's official correspondence from that period addresses routine administrative matters: militia appointments, judicial commissions, requests for clemency. The provisional expense entries appear in only the first quarter report. No similar entries appear in subsequent quarters. The recipients identified by initials cannot be matched to contractors, suppliers, or medical practitioners with business before the state. The money was paid, recorded, audited, and never explained. County sheriffs maintained custody records for all individuals detained in county jails. Intake logs recorded the prisoner's name, alleged offense, arresting authority, date of arrest, and subsequent disposition. Massachusetts law required justification for detention longer than 24 hours. Prisoners awaiting trial were entitled to legal representation. The system protected against arbitrary imprisonment. The Berkshire County Jail Register for early 1840 follows expected patterns. Most inmates were held for debt, public intoxication, or petty theft. Entries include the prisoner's town of residence and the justice of the peace who authorized detention. Release entries note payment of fines, completion of sentences, or transfer to state prison. The handwriting is consistent and entries are chronological. Between February 18th and March 4th, 1840, 6 individuals were detained under entries that deviate from standard format. Each entry lists only a surname and initials: Foster T, Briggs M, Ward J. The offense column contains the phrase "removal pending administrative review." No arresting officer is named. No justice of the peace authorized the detention. No town of residence is recorded. The entries include no information about legal representation or hearing dates. All 6 individuals were released on March 5, 1840. The release entries state only "discharge per order" without specifying whose order or on what authority. The discharged individuals were not returned to any named town. The custody log includes no forwarding location. Standard procedure required notification to the prisoner's town selectman upon release. No such notifications appear in municipal records. The 6 individuals occupied cells for 2 weeks without legal process, without charges, without trial, and were then released into an administrative void. The Commonwealth maintained road maintenance accounts for each county. Surveyors of highways submitted quarterly reports on road conditions, repair work, and expenditures. Towns assessed property owners for road upkeep or required labor service. The system ensured passable routes for commerce and communication. Detailed accounts prevented corruption and waste. Berkshire County's road maintenance records for 1840 show typical activity. Winter damage required spring repairs. Turnpike companies maintained major routes. Towns repaired local roads through assessed labor. The reports document specific locations, types of work performed, and costs incurred. Surveyor signatures certified accuracy. A March 1840 entry in the county road account lists expenditure of $340 for emergency road clearing and bridge repair, Western Hill District. The entry specifies no town, no specific road, and no surveyor responsible for the work. A notation indicates payment was made to local labor as contracted without naming contractors or detailing the nature of the emergency. The expenditure was authorized by the county treasurer without the usual supporting documentation. The county commissioner's minutes from March 1840 make no reference to emergency road work. No storm or flood event appears in weather records from that period. No town petitioned for emergency road assistance. Standard procedure required commissioners to inspect major repair work and certify completion before payment. The $340 expenditure appears in the quarterly account without inspection reports, without contractor names, without location specifics. The money was paid for work that cannot be located, in response to an emergency that was never documented, on roads that were never identified. Massachusetts militia companies were organized by town and required annual muster for inspection and drill. Company rosters listed officers and enrolled men. The Adjutant General maintained comprehensive records of militia organization, equipment, and readiness. Companies reported strength, armament, and training activities. The system supported rapid mobilization in case of emergency. The 3rd Regiment, stationed in Berkshire County, mustered 12 companies in 1840. Rosters show typical composition: farmers, mechanics, and merchants between ages 18 and 45. Officers were elected according to regulations. Companies drilled quarterly and participated in annual regimental muster. Records document attendance, disciplinary matters, and equipment inventory. In February 1840, the Adjutant General's office received a request for arms and equipment: 20 muskets, bayonets, cartridge boxes, and 2 drums. The requisition identified the requesting unit as Provisional Company, Western District, and was signed by Captain E. Stevens. The requisition followed proper format and cited correct regulatory authority. The Adjutant General approved release of the equipment from the state arsenal at Springfield. The equipment was transported to Pittsfield in late February and signed for by an individual claiming authority to receive it on behalf of Captain Stevens. No provisional company appears in regimental records. No Captain E. Stevens held militia commission in Massachusetts in 1840. The 3rd Regiment's annual report makes no mention of a new company or supplementary formation. The requisitioned equipment never appeared in subsequent inventory accounts. 20 muskets and associated military equipment entered the supply chain, reached Berkshire County, and vanished from the administrative record without subsequent accounting or return. Land surveys required trained surveyors licensed by the Commonwealth. Surveys established property boundaries, located public roads, and resolved disputes. Surveyors filed plans with county registries and maintained field notebooks documenting their work. The profession demanded precision and adherence to established standards. Survey records were permanent legal documents. The Massachusetts Board of Survey Commissioners maintained registry of licensed surveyors and a repository of official plans. The 1840 registry lists 43 active surveyors in western Massachusetts. Their submitted plans document routine work, estate divisions, road layouts, mill dam locations. Each plan includes the surveyor's certification, date of survey, and location by town and range. In April 1840, a survey plan was filed with the board, showing a grid layout of streets and building lots. The plan depicts 43 parcels arranged along 5 streets, named only as 1st Street through 5th Street. The plan includes a notation: survey completed March 1840, location by prior agreement. The surveyor's name is illegible. No town or county is specified. The plan shows a meeting house lot, a burying ground, and areas marked for common use. The plan arrived with an official transmittal letter requesting it be filed as a provisional document pending final approval. The letter promised subsequent documentation would follow. No follow-up materials were ever received. The plan was assigned a filing number and placed in the provisional holdings. It was never transferred to permanent records. The board's annual report makes no mention of provisional surveys awaiting completion. The plan exists as a precise document showing an organized settlement that has no recorded location, surveyed by someone who could not be identified for a purpose that was never clarified. The records of the Society for the Relief of Aged and Indigent Persons contain correspondence from individuals requesting assistance. The Society, established in 1832, provided small pensions to elderly residents without family support. Applicants submitted letters describing their circumstances, age, and inability to work. Local ministers or selectmen provided character references. The Society's board reviewed applications quarterly. Most applications followed standard patterns: elderly widows, disabled laborers, former soldiers. The Society investigated claims to prevent fraud. Approved applicants received modest quarterly payments. The Society maintained detailed case files including all correspondence and investigation reports. In January 1840, the Society received a letter from someone identifying herself as widow of T. Foster, age 67, without family. The letter described circumstances of poverty and isolation. It requested consideration for assistance. The letter bore no town address, no return location. A postscript added, "Letters may be sent care of Postmaster, Provisional District, Western County, to be collected." The Society's secretary wrote to the postmaster in Pittsfield requesting information about the applicant. The Pittsfield postmaster replied that he had no knowledge of the individual or the Provisional District reference. The Society's board decided to approve a small quarterly pension based on the letter's credible tone. Payment vouchers show $12 was sent quarterly throughout 1840. The vouchers indicate money was sent to Hold for Collection, Boston Post Office. No evidence exists that payments were collected. No further correspondence was received from the applicant. The Society's 1841 report notes the case as unresolved, payments suspended pending contact. The elderly widow vanished into the postal system like the letters before her. The Massachusetts Temperance Society published monthly reports on local chapter activities. Chapters organized pledges, distributed literature, and pressured town governments to restrict liquor licensing. The movement grew rapidly in the late 1830s. Reports documented membership, meetings, and legislative advocacy. The Society maintained correspondence with chapters across the Commonwealth. The March 1840 report includes a brief notice. A new chapter has been organized in the Western District with initial membership of 23 persons. The chapter has requested literature and pledge cards. We commend their initiative and welcome them to the cause. The notice provides no town name, no chapter officers, no meeting location. The Society's secretary received a letter in February 1840 requesting temperance materials. The letter was signed J. Briggs, Secretary, and described formation of a chapter among residents committed to moral reform. The letter requested 50 pledge cards and copies of the Society's founding principles. The materials were sent to Hold for Collection, Pittsfield. A second letter arrived in April acknowledging receipt of materials and reporting that 42 residents had signed temperance pledges. The letter included $3 as membership dues for the new chapter. The money was recorded in the Society's accounts. The letter promised reports on future activities. No further correspondence was received. The 1841 annual report makes no mention of the Western District chapter. The Society's secretary wrote twice requesting information about chapter activities. Both letters were returned marked, addressee unknown. 42 people signed temperance pledges, joined a moral reform movement, and disappeared from the organizational record. Fire insurance companies maintained detailed records of policies, inspections, and claims. The Massachusetts Mutual Fire Insurance Company, established in 1828, insured buildings throughout the Commonwealth. Policyholders paid annual premiums based on building construction, occupancy, and fire risk. The company employed inspectors to verify insured properties and investigate losses. The company's 1840 policy register shows typical business: farmhouses, barns, mills, commercial buildings. Each policy includes the property owner's name, location by town and road, building description, and insured value. Inspectors noted construction materials, chimney conditions, and proximity to other buildings. Premium rates reflected assessed risk. 3 policies issued in February 1840 deviate from standard format. Each policy lists a building type, dwelling house, barn, meeting house, but provides no street address or town name. The location is described as Provisional District, Western Berkshire County. The policies were issued to individuals named Foster, Stevens, and Ward. Insured values totaled $2,200. Premium payments were received by mail. The company's inspection reports from that period make no mention of examining buildings in any provisional district. Standard procedure required on-site inspection before policy issuance. The policies were nevertheless issued and premiums accepted. In April 1840, the company secretary wrote to the policyholders requesting clarification of property locations for company records. The letters were returned undelivered. The policies remained in force through 1840. No premiums were paid for 1841. The policies lapsed. The company never located the insured properties. 3 buildings with a combined value of $2,200 were insured, premiums collected, and the properties themselves never verified to exist. The Massachusetts Bible Society distributed scripture to families unable to afford Bibles. The society relied on donations and operated through volunteer agents in each county. Agents identified families in need, verified their circumstances, and distributed Bibles with the society's bookplate. Monthly reports documented distribution numbers and recipient locations. The society's agent in Berkshire County submitted routine reports throughout 1839 and 1840. The reports typically listed distribution by town: 10 Bibles to families in Stockbridge, 6 to families in Lenox, 12 to families in Adams. The reports named recipients and included notes on circumstances: poor family, 4 children, elderly couple, no Bible in home. The February 1840 report includes an addendum: 12 additional Bibles distributed to families in newly settled area, Western District. Families expressed gratitude. Further distribution likely needed. The report provides no town name, no recipient names, no specific location. The agent's covering letter explains, the families in question are situated beyond the regular towns but within county bounds. I determined distribution was appropriate under society guidelines. The society's treasurer questioned the irregular entry. The agent replied in March, the situation is temporary. The families are respectable persons of good character. I verified their need and distributed Bibles according to our mission. The society accepted this explanation. The 12 Bibles were recorded in the annual distribution total. The 1841 report makes no reference to the Western District. The agent submitted no further information about the families or their location. 12 families received scripture, expressed gratitude, and vanished from the missionary record. Coroners investigated suspicious deaths and deaths without medical attendance. Massachusetts law required inquests for deaths by violence, accident, or unknown cause. Coroners summoned juries, examined bodies, heard testimony, and filed reports with county courts. The reports documented circumstances, medical findings, and jury verdicts. These records provide crucial evidence about public health and social conditions. The Berkshire County Coroner's reports for 1840 show typical cases: farm accidents, drownings, stillbirths, sudden deaths of elderly persons. Each report includes the deceased's name, age, residence, date and place of death, and circumstances. Jury verdicts range from accidental death to natural causes to by person or persons unknown in cases of suspected violence. One report, dated March 15, 1840, documents an inquest held in Pittsfield. The deceased is identified only as male, approximately 35 years, name unknown. The body was discovered by a farmer on a rural road. The coroner's examination noted signs of fever and emaciation. The jury heard testimony from the farmer who found the body and a physician who examined the remains. The verdict reads, death by natural causes, typhoid fever probable. Deceased appears to have been traveling and succumbed to illness. The report includes no information about burial location or notification of family. Standard procedure required the coroner to determine the deceased's identity and notify relatives. The report mentions personal effects: Worn clothing, no identification papers, small sum of coins. A marginal note states, inquiries made, no missing person reports received. The deceased was buried in an unmarked grave at county expense. The coroner closed the case. A man died alone, unidentified, on a Berkshire County road in March 1840, and no one reported him missing. The Massachusetts Horticultural Society maintains seed distribution programs for agricultural improvement. Members shared seeds of productive crop varieties, fruit tree grafts, and garden plants. The society published catalogs and encouraged correspondence between farmers. Distribution records documented varieties sent, recipients, and reported results. The Society's secretary received a letter in January 1840 requesting vegetable seeds for spring planting. I am establishing a garden to supply families in a small settlement in western Massachusetts. I would be grateful for beans, corn, squash, and potato starts sufficient for 40 families. I can provide payment if required. The letter was signed E. Morton and bore no return address. The Society sent a generous quantity of seeds with a letter requesting reports on growing results for the Society's records. The seeds were dispatched in February. In July, the Society received a thank you note. The seeds performed admirably. We have good crops of beans and squash. Corn is promising. The families are grateful for your assistance. The note bore the same signature. It provided no location details. The Society's secretary wrote back requesting more information about the settlement, soil conditions, and whether additional seeds would be useful for fall planting. The letter was returned marked undeliverable. The Society's 1840 annual report mentions the successful distribution in a footnote, but notes further correspondence was not possible. Seeds sufficient for 40 families were sent, planted, grew successfully, and the families who benefited from them could not be contacted again. The preceding records originate from 9 different institutions: Deeds Registry, Census Bureau, Education Board, Health Department, Postal Service, Treasury, Jail, Militia, and Survey Commission. Each institution operated independently. Each maintained its own protocols and standards. Each generated records without knowledge of what other agencies documented. Yet the records contain repeated elements: provisional locations, temporary designations, irregular procedures, administrative silence. The deeds were recorded for Township 7. The census found 22 households outside standard routes. The school return described a provisional location. The health officer requested supplies for an unspecified population. The mail was forwarded to Township 7. The Treasury paid provisional expenses. The jail held 6 people for administrative review. The militia released equipment to a provisional company. The surveyor mapped streets without a town name. Each event occurred between January and March 1840. Each involved locations in western Berkshire County that could not be precisely identified. The repetition extends beyond institutions: Foster, Briggs, Stevens, Ward, Thompson. These surnames appear across multiple records. They show up on jail logs, postal records, insurance policies, militia requisitions. They appear too frequently to be coincidental, yet none can be traced to established families in Berkshire County. The 1840 census lists thousands of names. These particular surnames, in this particular cluster, appear only in the irregular records. The institutional coordination this suggests was unprecedented. Deeds registries did not communicate with school boards. Health officers did not share information with postal authorities. Yet the records construct a remarkably consistent picture: a location that was being documented, supplied, protected, and then deliberately obscured. Each institution did its part independently, following instructions that came from a source none of them named in their records. The governor of Massachusetts in 1840 was Marcus Morton, serving his second non-consecutive term. Morton was a Democrat in a predominantly Whig state. His administration faced opposition from the legislature on most policy matters. His official papers document routine executive business, appointments, pardons, correspondence with state agencies. The papers are comprehensive and well preserved. The papers contain no executive orders regarding provisional districts. No confidential authorizations appear. No instructions about irregular record-keeping exist. Yet multiple agencies cited gubernatorial authority for their unusual procedures. The Treasury justified provisional expenses through executive communication. The health officer requisitioned supplies under state authority. The jail released prisoners per order. The militia issued equipment under proper authorization. Morton's private papers are held separately from official records. They include personal correspondence, notes, and reflections. The private papers contain a single entry from March 1840, a brief memorandum in Morton's handwriting. The memorandum reads, "Matter resolved per agreement with commissioners, records sealed pending further developments. Personal knowledge of this affair weighs heavily. Justice required difficult choices." The memorandum mentions no specific matter. It names no commissioners. It explains no choices. The entry stands alone, surrounded by mundane notes about appointments and political strategy. Morton's subsequent private writings never reference the memorandum again. He served as governor until January 1841 and returned to private life. He died in 1864. His papers were donated to the Massachusetts Historical Society. The memorandum was catalogued but not explained. If Morton issued instructions about provisional records, those instructions were either verbal or destroyed. If commissioners made agreements, those agreements were not documented in official proceedings. The memorandum confirms that something occurred requiring gubernatorial action, official secrecy, and personal moral compromise. It provides no details about what was resolved or why it weighed on Morton's conscience. County commissioners managed county affairs, jails, courthouses, roads, budgets. They met quarterly, kept minutes, and documented all decisions. Their authority derived from state law and local election. Their actions were subject to public scrutiny and audit. The Berkshire County Commissioners' records for 1840 are mostly routine. The minutes from March 1840 contain an unusual notation. After standard business about courthouse repairs and road allocations, the final entry states, "Commissioners met in executive session regarding urgent matter referred by state authority. Session closed to public per statutory exemption. No minutes recorded. Decisions communicated to relevant parties." The next regular session minutes resumed standard business with no reference to the executive session. Massachusetts law allowed executive sessions only for litigation discussions, personnel matters, or issues affecting public safety. The law required summary minutes even for closed sessions. The commissioner's decision to record no minutes violated standard practice. The relevant parties who received communications cannot be identified. The urgent matter was never clarified. Commissioner records from surrounding months show increasing financial stress. Poor relief expenses rose. Jail maintenance costs exceeded budget. Road repairs demanded more funding. Yet in March, $340 was paid for unspecified emergency road work. The commissioners approved the payment without documentation. The approval required unanimous consent from all three commissioners. The commissioners during this period were Josiah Harding, Samuel Booth, and Daniel Spaulding. All three were established residents, respected in their communities. None left papers explaining the executive session. None ever publicly discussed the March events. They continued serving as commissioners through 1841. They authorized no similar payments and held no similar executive sessions. They performed their duties according to law and precedent. But in March 1840, they met in secret, recorded nothing, and approved irregular expenditures that would otherwise have been transparently documented and publicly justified. The pattern extends to private institutions. The Fire Insurance Company issued policies without inspections. The Bible Society distributed without naming recipients. The Temperance Society acknowledged a chapter without location. The Horticultural Society sent seeds without follow-up. Each institution acted on faith, on assurances from apparently credible sources, and none questioned why their normal procedures were being bypassed. Insurance companies did not issue policies without inspecting properties. The financial risk was too great. Yet 3 policies were issued, premiums collected, and no inspector ever visited the buildings. The company records show no directive to waive inspections. The decision must have seemed reasonable at the time, based on representations from someone the company trusted. The Bible Society's mission demanded verification of need. Bibles were precious resources, donated by the faithful. The Society did not waste them on fraudulent requests. Yet the agent distributed 12 Bibles to families he could not subsequently locate. His reports show conviction that the distribution was proper. He defended his actions when questioned. He believed the families existed and deserved help. Private citizens also participated. The Boston postmaster forwarded mail to an unknown destination. The Springfield Arsenal released weapons to a phantom company. The Pittsfield Courier delivered medical supplies to an unnamed location. Each person acted on what appeared to be legitimate authority. Each followed instructions that seemed reasonable. Each participated in creating an administrative ghost. This was not conspiracy. Conspiracies require coordination and secrecy agreements. This was orchestration. Someone with authority gave instructions that appeared legitimate. Those instructions ensured documentation was created, resources were delivered, and official silence was maintained. The people following instructions likely had no idea they were participating in anything unusual. They simply did their jobs, processed paperwork, and moved on to the next task. Financial analysis provides another perspective. The documented expenditures total approximately $4,800. Provisional treasury payments, road repairs, militia equipment, medical supplies, insurance premiums, postal services, and various other transactions. This sum represents significant resources for 1840. The money came from state and county budgets, private insurance reserves, and charitable donations. It flowed to recipients who could not be identified for purposes that were incompletely documented, supporting a location that cannot be mapped. The expenditures required authorization at multiple levels. The state treasurer needed executive approval for provisional expenses. The county commissioners had to authorize road payments. The militia commander approved equipment release. Insurance company officers issued policies. Each authorization was granted. Each expenditure was processed according to standard procedures, except for the absence of complete documentation. Follow the money through the system. State appropriations to provisional expenses, county funds to emergency repairs, insurance premiums to phantom properties, charitable donations to untraceable recipients. The money entered the formal economy and vanished into administrative voids. No accounts were settled. No audits questioned the disappearances. No investigations followed the trail. The financial controls designed to prevent fraud and waste were bypassed through legitimate appearing authorizations. The recipients, identified by initials or partial names, received substantial sums. J.H. received $400 for construction materials. S.P. received $620 for provisions. R.M. received $380 for medical services. These amounts represent months of income for skilled laborers. Someone was being provisioned, housed, and cared for at public expense. The expenditures suggest a population requiring systematic support. The lack of transparency suggests reasons the support could not be publicly acknowledged. The financial pattern implies duration. One-time emergency aid would have been simpler to document. Sustained support over months required ongoing authorization, repeated payments, and continuous administrative cooperation. This was not a brief intervention, but an extended commitment of resources. Legal protections also failed. The 6 jail detainees were held without charges, without legal representation, without hearings, and released without explanation. Massachusetts law guaranteed due process. The state constitution prohibited arbitrary detention, yet 6 people spent 2 weeks in county jail in direct violation of their constitutional rights, and no record shows anyone objecting. The jail keeper maintained custody logs as required. He documented intake and release. He followed orders from authority he apparently deemed legitimate. But no justice of the peace authorized the detention. No court scheduled hearings. No lawyers visited the prisoners. The procedural safeguards built into the justice system simply did not operate. The detainees' surnames matched those appearing in other records: Foster, Briggs, Ward. If these were the same individuals referenced in postal records and insurance documents, they were being systematically removed from a location, held without process, and then released with instructions not to return. Removal pending administrative review suggests a bureaucratic rather than criminal procedure. Administrative detention is not criminal punishment, it is regulatory enforcement. The release order specified no conditions, no restrictions, no future obligations. The detainees simply ceased to exist in the official record. They were not returned to their communities because the records never identified their communities. They were not provided travel funds or assistance because the system presumed they would provide for themselves. They were removed from custody and from documentation simultaneously. If these individuals returned to wherever they came from, they did so invisibly. If they relocated elsewhere, they left no trail. If they protested their treatment, no complaint was recorded. They passed through the justice system, had their liberty violated, and were offered no remedy. The state exercised power without accountability. Re-examine the February 1840 militia requisition. 20 muskets, military equipment for a provisional company. March 1840, jail intake of 6 individuals for administrative review. The weapons were distributed. The detentions occurred. The timing suggests a sequence. First, military equipment was positioned. Then, individuals were removed from their location. The equipment never appeared in subsequent inventories. The individuals never reappeared in documentation. The militia equipment was not requested for training or readiness drills. It was requisitioned for a provisional company that had no official existence. Provisional formations were authorized for emergencies: insurrection, riot, natural disaster. No such emergency was publicly declared. Yet 20 muskets with bayonets were issued under proper authority and vanished into administrative silence. The medical supplies requisition specified laudanum, surgical bandages, Peruvian bark. These items treated pain, wounds, and fever. The quantities suggested multiple patients or extended treatment. Dr. Caldwell received the supplies in early March. The jail releases occurred March 5th. The sequence suggests medical treatment, followed by forced removal. The detained individuals may have included people who required medical attention before being relocated. The timing of financial expenditures shows similar patterns. Treasury payments began in January. Road expenses were authorized in March. Insurance policies were issued in February. School operations ran November through March. The expenditures trace an arc from establishment through operation to termination. Resources were committed, services were delivered, and then everything stopped. The 1841 records show none of these activities continuing. This was not an ongoing concern requiring sustained support. This was a temporary situation requiring intensive resources over a defined period. Something happened between November 1839 and March 1840. That something required housing, feeding, educating, and eventually removing a population of approximately 140 persons. The administrative record documents the response, but never explains the necessity. Consider what acknowledgement would have required. If a settlement of 140 persons existed in Berkshire County, it would need legal standing. It would require township organization, tax assessment, legal jurisdiction, and electoral representation. The residents would need property rights, law enforcement protection, and access to courts. The settlement would be integrated into the Commonwealth's administrative structure. Legal integration would require explaining where these 140 persons came from. It would require justifying why they were settled in an unincorporated area. It would require addressing why provisional rather than permanent arrangements were established. These explanations would become public record. They would be debated in the legislature and reported in newspapers. The reasons for the settlement would necessarily be revealed. The provisional approach avoided these requirements. Temporary designations created administrative space without legal permanence. Irregular procedures allowed service delivery without public accountability. By keeping everything provisional, temporary, and irregular, authorities avoided having to explain the underlying necessity. The census enumerator's supplementary notation is revealing: 22 households recorded separately, not integrated into the main enumeration, not counted in official totals, recorded but segregated from the standard record. The households existed for administrative purposes, but were excluded from the permanent population count. They were documented in a way that allowed their documentation to be ignored. This pattern, documentation without integration, runs through all the records. The settlement was real enough to require services. It was substantial enough to require sustained resources. Yet it was never acknowledged as a permanent community requiring legal status and public justification. It was addressed as a provisional situation requiring temporary responses. The provisional status prevented questions about permanence, and temporary measures avoided requirements for explanation. The geography itself is suggestive. Berkshire County in 1840 was well mapped and largely settled. The hill country contained farms, small villages, and scattered homesteads. No large tracts of unoccupied land existed where 140 persons could settle without notice. Yet the courier made 3-day journeys to deliver supplies. The enumerator spent unexplained days outside his standard route. The surveyor mapped streets in an unmapped location. The references to Western District and Hill Country placed the location in the higher elevations away from the major towns. This was terrain difficult to access in winter, requiring travel over rough roads or paths. The courier's extended travel times suggest distance from main routes. The emergency road repair authorization suggests access difficulties that required correction. Higher elevations meant isolation, limited agricultural potential, and exposure to harsh weather. These were not desirable settlement locations. Established communities developed in valleys near water power and transportation routes. Hill country attracted settlers only when valley lands were unavailable. If 140 persons were settled in marginal hill country during winter, the settlement was not voluntary preference but assignment. The 22 households suggest family groups, not solitary individuals. The school enrollment of 38 pupils confirms children were present. The Bible Society distributed 12 Bibles to families. These were not transient workers or temporary residents. These were families with children requiring education and religious materials. They were living in housing substantial enough to ensure. They were forming community organizations like temperance societies. They were establishing presence despite the location's disadvantages. Yet they built on land with no legal title. The deeds were recorded, but location was not specified. Property rights existed on paper, but not on maps. The families occupied space without owning it. They were present without having chosen their location. The records end abruptly in March 1840. The school did not file a return for 1841. No mail accumulated for Township 7 after March. No treasury payments continued into the second quarter. The insurance policies lapsed. The Bible Society agent made no further distributions. The temperance chapter sent no more reports. The surveyor's provisional plan was never finalized. Every administrative thread terminated simultaneously. Termination required the same coordination as establishment. Schools do not close without someone dismissing the teacher. Insurance companies do not let policies lapse without attempting to collect renewal premiums. Treasury payments do not stop without someone canceling authorization. The synchronized ending suggests centralized decision-making, just as the beginning had. March was the month of jail releases. March was the month of the governor's memorandum. March was the month of the commissioner's executive session. March was when the courier delivered medical supplies and when emergency road repairs were authorized. March was when the administrative apparatus that supported the settlement shifted from provision to termination. The people presumably went somewhere. 140 persons, 22 households, 38 schoolchildren. They were not simply dispersed. They required relocation, transportation, perhaps new housing elsewhere. Yet no records document any such relocation. No town reports receiving new residents in spring 1840. No other county records show unusual arrivals. The people vanished from one administrative system without appearing in any other. Unless they remained where they were but became invisible to administration. Unless the provisional status was removed by simply ceasing to acknowledge their existence. Unless the records stopped because the decision was made to stop creating records. The settlement might have continued without administrative recognition. The families might have stayed, living outside the documented systems that briefly recognized them. The consequences of official silence are measurable. No legal precedent was established. No policy was created. No procedures were codified. The events of 1840 did not inform future practice because they were not officially acknowledged to have occurred. The institutional knowledge remained fragmented across agencies that never shared information. The financial expenditures were absorbed into general accounts. The $4,800 disappeared into the Commonwealth's annual budget without affecting fiscal policy or prompting audit questions. The money was spent, but not in ways that created political accountability or public debate. Resources were committed without legislative appropriation or executive explanation. The people involved received no recognition. The teacher E. Morton was never certified by the Board of Education. Dr. Caldwell was never admitted to the Medical Society. Postmaster at Township 7 was never officially appointed. These individuals performed public functions without public acknowledgement. Their service exists in fragmentary records, but not in official rosters or professional histories. The families who lived in the settlement remain unnamed in most records. The children who attended school were never counted in enrollment statistics. The families who joined the Temperance Society were never included in membership totals. The policyholders who paid insurance premiums were never added to the company's roster of protected properties. They participated in civic institutions without civic recognition. This was the purpose of provisional status, to allow administration without acknowledgement. Services could be delivered without establishing precedents. Resources could be committed without public justification. People could be settled, supported, and removed without affecting official narratives about settlement, population, or policy. The provisional approach allowed the state to respond to a situation without admitting the situation existed. The Massachusetts State Archives contain a sealed file designated Berkshire County Special Matter, 1840. The file was sealed by executive order. Access restrictions were never lifted. The archive's catalog lists the file's existence but provides no description of contents. The seal was authorized under provisions allowing confidentiality for ongoing investigations or matters affecting public safety. No expiration date was set. Standard practice required sealed files to be reviewed periodically and opened when restrictions no longer applied. Investigations concluded. Public safety concerns diminished. The sealed Berkshire file was never reviewed and never opened. It was simply maintained in sealed status indefinitely. The archive transferred the file through successive storage systems, from filing cabinets to secure vaults to climate-controlled repositories, always maintaining its sealed status. Researchers occasionally petitioned for access. The requests were denied without explanation. The denial letters cited executive authority and legal exemptions, but provided no substantive justification. The file remained sealed, not because of active policy decisions, but because no one chose to open it. The inertia of bureaucracy maintained secrecy that might no longer serve any purpose. The file's existence confirms that someone created a comprehensive record of the Berkshire events. Someone assembled documents, wrote reports, and filed them under seal. The decision to seal rather than destroy suggests the information might have future relevance. Destruction would have eliminated any possibility of disclosure. Sealing preserved the record while preventing access. The choice suggests uncertainty about whether the information would need to be retrieved. What would justify sealing rather than destroying? Legal liability that might require documentation. Potential challenges that would need evidentiary response. The possibility that the situation might recur and precedents would be needed. The sealed file represents insurance against future contingencies that never materialized. Historical societies in Berkshire County preserve local records, photographs, and oral histories. Researchers have examined these collections for evidence of 1840 events. The collections contain no photographs of Township 7, no letters mentioning provisional settlements, no diary entries describing mysterious populations. The local historical record is silent. This absence is itself evidence. Small communities remembered unusual events. Oral traditions preserved stories of disasters, conflicts, and notable occurrences. The settlement of 140 persons in difficult terrain during winter would have attracted attention. Neighbors would have noticed. Travelers would have reported. Local historians would have noted the development. Yet no such accounts exist. Either the settlement was so isolated that no one outside official channels knew of it, or knowledge of it was systematically discouraged. The isolation explanation seems implausible given the frequent official contact. Couriers delivered supplies. The enumerator visited. The The insurance agent presumably communicated with policyholders. These contacts required travel through settled areas where movements would be observed. Systematic discouragement could take subtle forms. Officials might have indicated the matter was not suitable for discussion. Local residents might have been told the settlement involved confidential state business. Rumors might have been countered with plausible but false explanations. Over time, in the absence of written confirmation, memories would fade, and uncertainty would prevent oral traditions from forming. The absence of local memory suggests intentional suppression or extraordinary secrecy. A population of 140 persons cannot be hidden through physical isolation alone in a settled county. They can be hidden through administrative silence and social pressure not to inquire. The lack of historical record demonstrates that such pressure, if applied, was effective. Property ownership records provide another line of investigation. The 43 parcels recorded in March 1840 should have subsequent ownership histories. Property changed hands through sale, inheritance, or tax foreclosure. Continuous chains of title should exist from 1840 to the present. These chains would reveal who eventually occupied or owned the land. The deeds reference landmarks, Cold River Millworks, Turnpike Extension. These features can be located. Modern surveys and historical maps allow identification of areas matching the described relationships. Several locations in western Berkshire County fit the geographic references, but the property records for those areas show no transactions dated March 1840. The contemporary ownership chains run from earlier dates to later dates, without the 1840 transfers appearing. This suggests the 1840 deeds were recorded, but never integrated into local title records. They exist in the county registry as isolated documents, unconnected to the properties they ostensibly describe. The legal effect is that the parcels described in the deeds have no established location. They exist legally, but not geographically. Title examiners encountering such deeds would treat them as defects, requiring correction. If property changed hands today in those locations, title insurance companies would identify the 1840 deeds as clouds on title. The current owners would need to establish that their title chains supersede or are unaffected by the 1840 transactions. This would require legal proceedings to quiet title. No such proceedings have occurred. The 1840 deeds remain in the registry, uncontested and unresolved. They represent property transactions that are legally recorded but practically meaningless. They document land transfers that happened on paper but apparently not in reality. The deeds persist as legal artifacts, disconnected from actual property. Who benefited from silence? The Commonwealth avoided public controversy about whatever situation required settlement of 140 persons in winter 1840. County officials avoided accountability for expenditures that might have been questioned. Private institutions avoided complications from irregular procedures. The governor avoided political exposure on a sensitive matter. Those who might have been harmed by silence cannot be identified. If the 140 persons were voluntarily settled and peacefully removed, they might have benefited from state support even if provided irregularly. If they were involuntarily confined or coerced, they were harmed by the lack of public accountability and legal protection. The records allow both interpretations. The consequences depend on facts the records deliberately obscure. The unidentified dead man found in March, male, approximately 35 years, name unknown, might have been one of the removed persons. He died of fever on a rural road, unidentified and unmissed. No one claimed his body. No one reported him missing. The coroner conducted an investigation that raised no questions about why an apparently healthy adult would be traveling alone through Winter Hill country without identification. If he was from the settlement, his death during the removal process would implicate authorities in whatever harm befell him. If he was unrelated, his death in March 1840 on a Berkshire County road was unfortunate coincidence. The record allows no determination. The body was buried in an unmarked grave. No one knows his name. The institutional response was a perfunctory investigation that preserved no information, allowing subsequent identification. Silence protected authorities from accountability. It prevented public knowledge and debate. It allowed officials to exercise power without oversight. Whatever their intentions, whatever their justifications, the result was that 140 persons were addressed through irregular procedures, denied legal protection, and removed from public knowledge. The investigation documents administrative competence applied to systematic obscurity. Every institution performed its function. Records were created, resources were allocated, services were delivered. The machinery of government operated smoothly, but it operated to conceal rather than illuminate. Documentation was precise where it didn't matter and vague where it did. Procedures were followed except when violated. Coordination was evident but unexplained. The fragmentary record proves that something happened. The fragment's consistency suggests the something was substantial, involved significant resources, and required institutional cooperation. The deliberate gaps in documentation demonstrate that authorities chose not to create complete records. This was not bureaucratic failure, but bureaucratic discipline. Researchers can establish that approximately 140 persons were documented in western Berkshire County between November 1839 and March 1840. That they received services from multiple governmental and private institutions, that they were provisionally rather than permanently acknowledged, and that all documentation ceased abruptly in March. Researchers cannot establish who these persons were, why they were there, where they went, or what happened to them. The sealed file in the state archives might answer these questions. It might explain why provisional settlements were necessary, who authorized them, and what became of the residents. Or it might contain only administrative correspondence and financial records that add detail without clarifying purpose. The seal ensures uncertainty. The town that doesn't appear on any map existed in the space between documentation and acknowledgement. It was real enough to generate dozens of official records, substantial enough to require thousands of dollars in expenditures, and organized enough to have streets, schools, and civic organizations. Yet it was never admitted into the permanent administrative record of the Commonwealth. The records prove it existed. The silence about those records suggests reasons why its existence could not be publicly acknowledged. What were those reasons? The records refuse to answer. The silence endures.